again, the Lone Ranger, and together with my acquaintance here, Cola, we are going to present test video number 10, part 3, The Fog of Crisis. It is part of the series called Unmasking the Truth, part of a 4-part series listed there. And the point here is that in catastrophic thinking, truth is more precious than gold. I have the references here, and some of them are displayed, a handful of them. The fundamental purpose of catastrophic thinking is to formulate public policies which will guide us through catastrophes. To formulate such policies requires sorting the truth from all other assertions, especially in times of crisis. And in this 4-part series, we've looked at critical thinking, we've looked at labeling to determine what an assertion is, and now we're going to look at something that's common to all crises, and that is the fog of catastrophe. The recent pandemic of 2020 gave every American the experience of confusion that comes with every catastrophe. This is a real-life example of the essential concept of the fog of crisis. Please understand that the presenter is a firm believer and user in the science of vaccines. However, the rhetoric surrounding the vaccinations was not science. Also, the presenter owns Pfizer stock. The origins of the fog of crisis, which is an essential concept, is in Clausewitz on War. Karl von Clausewitz discussed the uncertainties on the battlefield. He called it the friction in war, and that all those reports have been lies, exaggerations, errors. In a few words, most reports are false. Most of what you hear is not true, and the timidity of men acts as a multiplier of lies and untruths. That's from the Clausewitz on War book. Fog of war. What I'm doing is thinking through my career and decisions with hindsight, but you don't have hindsight available at the time. And that was Robert McNamara in The Fog of War, his book. Information is never complete, always evolving, more precious than gold, often wrong or misleading. The thirst for accurate and truthful information is unquenchable. Who do you trust? Where can you go? Believe nothing of what you hear and half of what you see, Edgar Allan Poe. Most of history was caused by the unexpected. That's the host of this series, Mark Hobart. The battlefield is a scene of constant chaos. The winner will be the one who controls that chaos the best, Napoleon Bonaparte. And finally, don't forget, Murphy was an optimist. The inevitable never happens. It's always unexpected. The reports are often wrong. There are known knowns, things that you know. There are known unknowns, the things you don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns, the things that you don't know. Donald Rumsfeld, his book's down there. War is like a crisis. That's where this comes from. Realize that no plan survives contact with the enemy. That was by a Prussian general. And the thing is that that's also true of catastrophic planning and catastrophic policies. The tricky part of problem solving is anticipating the problems your solution that you anticipate and prepare for will create. Catastrophic thinking underwent a fundamental change here because of the pandemic of 2020. And some of the things that are listed in the caveat is expect risk and uncertainty, build in resilience, anticipate adversity, anticipate scarcity, and always think again. Keep going over it. There's a video number 5. Did you see that coming? Nostradamus, which talks about predictive abilities in catastrophic thinking. A couple books shown here. How to expect the unexpected, how to manage the unexpected. Truth versus assertions. This is why labeling is so important, because nothing can be a real cool hand. Nothing can be a real cool hand. That's what Cool Hand Luke said in the movie in 1967. And actually, that's what you really have. The key caveat skill is to weigh risk and probabilities in war and in catastrophic crises. You can experience the fog of war, fog of crisis. childhood games like Battleship, Stratego, Risk, adult games like poker, any form of gambling, investing in the stock market, dating. How do we cope when lives are on the line? You defer to experts. What's most persuasive is science, can give you an approximation of the truth. But science has been politicized. You can't trust science when it is embedded in a narrative. How to recognize bad science? There's the poster right over here, Spotting Bad Science. I recommend you get that thing, study it, read it. The danger of bad science, Dwight Eisenhower, the president, said, yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of scientific, technologically elite people. And that's what happened in the pandemic of 2020. Spotting Bad Science, the poster. My favorite comment that was made during the pandemic of 2020 is, I am science. Well, that right away you know they're not science. That science doesn't say that. Follow the science. Well, that was their narrative that they wanted you to follow, not science. Weaknesses of science. Reliance on deference to experts, but experts are experts of the past. Science is the pursuit of knowledge by people, and they have the same flaws as all of us. Pride, arrogance, stupidity, selfishness, and stubbornness. Pass. Too much deference to science occurred during the pandemic of 2020. Master to know what's science and what isn't. Master scientific method, statistics, critical thinking, questioning, skepticism. Science and medicine failed us during the pandemic of 2020. Every American personally experienced that fog of crisis. We relied on experts to lead us through this catastrophe, but the experts arrogantly lied and deceived to us and lost most of their credibility. Let's examine that. It was foreseeable, the pandemic, because we've had countless pandemics before. See the pandemic history here, especially the Spanish flu of 1918, which actually came in Kansas and Nebraska as a form of swine or avian flu. No vaccine or drugs. The best treatment turned out to be sunshine and fresh air. The hospitals set up cots outdoors. During and after World War I, it killed 50 million people in 3 years, in 3 waves. The United States lost 675,000 dead. India lost between 12 and 25 million because their records weren't. Strangely, the flu killed young adults. Catastrophic thinking anticipates future crises by looking to the past. Our company used to do that. Our country used to do that. Down there at the bottom is a pandemic influenza plan, the 2017 update, published by the CDC, but it was ignored by the CDC, the media, and that's how that should have been handled. That was the best thinking at the time. Instead, we go to lockdowns and untried vaccines. It was just terrible. How badly was the pandemic bungled by the USA healthcare system? Well, about 7.1 million people in the world died due to the coronavirus. The death rate was less than 1 per 1,000. The U.S. lost 1,212,500 out of a population of 330 million. Death rate is officially published at 3.55 per 1,000. In other words, we were terribly worse than the world as a whole. The other notable death rates: India, 0.374, Haiti, 0.074, Africa, except South Africa, which had its own very lethal strain, 1.2 per 1,000 died. So what we ignored in 2020, there have been many strains of influenza throughout history. The crown virus includes influenza, MERS, SARS. The virus in 2020 was just a more lethal version. Rather than just a respiratory contagion, what it did was it attacked and inflamed many organs at once. That's what led to its lethal nature. My source was webmd.com back in April 23, 2020. How did the experts fail us? Well, they lost all credibility. They lied about fresh air and sunshine. They lied about masks. They lied about drugs. Let's look at each of these. They lied about sunshine and fresh air. The CDC and WHO issued early statements that fresh air and sunshine effects on the virus were unknown. The articles, a couple of them are listed there. USA Today quoted the CDC. It's unclear how coronavirus will react to heat or sunlight. No, it wasn't. If you knew the history of 1918 flu, you knew better. Number 2, lies about masks. In the early part of March 2020, early in the pandemic, they said masks were not effective. They were later retracted and explained the mask shortages in hospitals. The lies were justified to avoid shortages of masks for essential workers. Well, of course, that problem was because all the masks were manufactured in China, even though that was a strategic asset. Later statements encouraged mask use. Again, the experts were wrong. They continued to lie. They said the mask would help protect you, but the real justification is to protect others from your coughing and your sneezing if you're infected. And you might be infected and not know it. Number 3, they lied about drugs. Big pharma, government officials, and a complicit media developed a narrative pushing untried vaccinations over all other alternatives. When an antiseptic drug was found that it also trusts malaria and saved millions of lives due to malaria and parasites, it was promoted as an alternative. Again, it was really more indirect. It was effective to reduce inflammation that was caused by the crown virus. And the government launched a campaign which ridiculed, slandered, and libeled this very valuable drug. See the references. How did that turn out for us? Not so good. Here's the world. 50 million people died in 1918. 7 million died in 2020. The USA, our death toll doubled. And we went from a small percentage of the total casualties to 1 out of every 7 that died was an American. India, 12 to 25 million died in 1918, but only 513,000 died in 2020. Africa, well, Africa had 155,000 reported deaths. Now, India and Africa have 1.4 billion people. The USA has 330 million people. Why was that? Because in India and Africa, because of parasites and ill health and the poor living conditions, they had extensive use of parasitic drugs, anti-parasitic drugs. The lessons learned: in a crisis except in war, where information, if it's widely disseminated, costs lives by giving your enemies intelligence, leaders should always tell the truth. I had to modify my caveat list in 2020 to number 2, communicate truthful information. I used to have it as communicate information. Which is worse, government that can't be trusted or deceitful experts? Well, in the interest of truth, I'm going to unmask myself. I am the Lone Ranger. I had to hide my identity to be an effective lawman, so I wore a mask. However, for all intents and purposes, especially in times of crisis and catastrophe, we must absolutely defend our First Amendment rights to free speech and access to the truth. So in the interests of truth, I, the Lone Ranger, will now reveal my identity and unmask myself.